Hello, everybody, and welcome back to You Exchange, the podcast where I exchange my user experiences to change them, and yours for the better. I'm Jeremy, a mentor and senior user researcher with over 8 years of experience and a background in neuroscience. Throughout my career, I've had the privilege of engaging with hundreds of users around the world. I've created this podcast with the aim of providing my mentorship and educational content, offering actionable tips, knowledge, and guidance in the realm of research to anyone having an interest in this area. And I hope that you will find this episode insightful. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. In this episode, I'm gonna take a step back and cover some important aspects that I think I should have covered probably before, which are related to my passion for UX and why probably it could be of interest to you if you're not yet in this field. So, I'm gonna talk about things such as my background, why I chose UX, why it's a deep passion of mine, why it might be of interest to you, and also why am I making this episode basically. So maybe let's start with that. Why am I making this episode? So we all know this situation in which your parents, grandparents, uncles, aunts, whatever, people who are not in your field of study asking you, what do you do? And when you're a user experience researcher, well, you try as much as you can. And over time, you come up with some new definitions. And I wanted to start with that because I think it's important, being a user experience professional and researcher, to not only adhere to one single definition, because there are definitions. However, I came to the realization, and I was surprised to see how little people knew about this discipline, basically. So that was my first observation. This happened 10 years ago when I started research professionally, and as a user experience researcher. This realization came to my mind 10 years ago, and then it went on and on and on throughout the years. And so I realized that this was not so known to people outside of the area. And then I thought, okay, I could give them the definition of user experience that I know more or less, to be honest, but probably a best way to answer this question would be to come up with my own definition, because this is ultimately what is user experience, is we all experience things a different way. And so when you learn about something, you integrate this notion, and then you will communicate it to your audience, so in this case to you, or in my case to people from my family, my friends, in your own words. And this is why it's so important, because I can repeat the definition. But in the end, if people do not get it, it's doing a disservice to user experience. And my goal, my mission, is to make user experience accessible, to make this field of study and to make, let's say, the science behind this, the knowledge we gather, the discipline, as understandable by people outside of this area. And this has implications that, in my opinion, are important. And I will go through that later. But so my first realization was, well, it was to be aware of the fact that people do not know what is user experience research, what is user experience design. So this happened 10 years ago, but it happened again a few days ago when some people that I know asked me about my podcast, because they knew that I was doing a podcast, but they didn't know what was it about. So then when I said user experience, and they were like, what's that? And so at that moment, I was like, I need to come up with a definition so that it's understandable. And I also need to diffuse that in a way that would be understandable by everyone. So that's my attempt on that. And I hope that if it's not clear, at least I will be able to communicate my passion for the field. And at least you will probably get more insights into why I started this podcast first and foremost. So let's start with my view on user experience. What it is, why it's so important to me, and why I started the podcast, basically. So for those who don't know, in user experience, we have user and we have experience, of course. So what is a user? A user is anyone using a product, a service, a system, a technology, whatever. I would say a product to be as broad as possible. So you're using a product. And then what is experience? Experience is the fact of experiencing something. So you're having an experience, basically. And so what is an experience? An experience is multifaceted, basically. So when we experience something, just think about if you went through this, if you go to Disneyland, or if you go to the cinema, or if you are having an amazing meal, for instance. You're experiencing something. And this experience is, let's say, you become aware of this experience or not in some regards, but you integrate all parts of this experience through different channels. They first come to you through your senses. And so we can all think about our 5 senses, but there are way more. Having studied neuroscience, I discovered, and I was super surprised at first to realize that we have more than 5 senses, of course. So imagine you go to an amazing restaurant. Of course, one of the senses that will dominate will be the taste, but not necessarily the only one. So you can also be impacted by the vision or by auditory stimuli if you have someone in the background potentially playing music. For instance, you can have some, let's say, atmosphere being created by the lights as well. And depending on who you are at the restaurant with, your experience might be like black or white, basically. And so we can already conceptualize that we are having an experience, and everyone knows that. Everyone knows what it is about experiencing something. And then everyone knows they are using technology, tools, objects, products in their everyday life. We all know that. But we take that for granted. And that is, in my opinion, maybe not a problem, but probably a small issue. And that should be corrected. I mean, that's the mission behind my podcast. So I also did this podcast, as I said, because I want to make that accessible. So when people ask me what is user experience, I see 2 things. The first one is that as professionals, we are building silos. We are making the discipline not necessarily accessible for people outside of our discipline because we are using fancy terms. Usability, findability, direct success rate, mental models, UX maturity, and the like. I am, of course, a defensor of using these terms because in the end, when you use a term, we use it because it has a meaning. And so that's the right way to go. I'm not saying the opposite. However, when we want to communicate the impact of what we are doing and the why behind what we are doing, using this kind of terms make kind of a disservice to us, basically, and to the discipline. Because it doesn't necessarily help people from outside the discipline to understand what we are doing. However, and that's the second thing that makes me like amazed, let's say, is the fact that user experience is omnipresent. It is so important. It is at the one of the things that are, let's say, at the very base of our day-to-day activities and of our lives. We cannot go through a day without using something or without experiencing something. It is ever present. And we might conceptualize that as a nice to have. And I might probably make another episode dedicated to that, related to the idea that it's a luxury to do user experience these days. When we see the ratios in companies of, let's say, 3 designers to 1 researcher and 5 developers to 1 designer, yes, we can directly see that the focus is not being placed on user experience, and it's not being placed on answering the right problems and solving the right problems. Maybe that might shift in the upcoming years. I see already a trend. However, there is a clear tendency and trend in our society to prioritize product over people and efficiency over need, basically. And so that's something that amazes me, to see that user experience is so ever present in our life, and yet so many people think that their use of products is, let's say, it's a given. If something doesn't work, it's a given. So there was a term, I don't remember exactly, but something that has to do with helpless. So there is a construct in psychology and in user experience that refers to the fact that users sometimes feel helpless. So it's like accepted helplessness or something like this. So it's the idea that when you use a technology and it doesn't work for you, you ultimately think that you are the problem and not the technology and not the product. And I find that deeply problematic, because in the end, our use of technologies can have an impact in our daily lives, basically. And we can see that in a lot of ways. And the impact can be minor or it can be major. If I put a big screen inside of a car, I am creating some distractions potentially. Or if I make my AI assistant buzzing through all directions and all channels possible, my driver might be distracted. So we can conceptualize how dangerous it can be, how user experience can be dangerous. I cannot count how many times I have taken the wrong path, and you for sure did it as well, when taking the metro, for instance, because the plan in the metro was not user-friendly or understandable. I can also take another example. When we take some bicycle through the bicycle sharing station, for instance, depending on the city you're living in, I experience different scenarios. In some cities, it's well done because you have directly an indicator regarding the state of the bicycle you're about to take. So you can see that if it has not been revised previously, well, then you will not take it. For instance, you will prioritize another one which has been revised more recently. That's an example. And I have been in other cities in which it's not the case, for instance. Or if you use a map, and inside of this map, well, the very basics of a map is not present, such as indicated where you are. And this is a real life scenario. So that's something that I'm deeply sensitive about, like the products and the experience they give us. And I think that we should always, always be frustrated when something doesn't work out, but not against ourselves, but against the technology. The technology is being designed to answer our needs. The products and services are being designed to answer our needs. And so this is something that really amazes me, to see that we, and myself included, forget that products and services should fit our needs. And so we should, quote unquote, let's say, protest, not per se, this is not the right word, but we should acknowledge when something isn't made right. And we can all conceptualize all sorts of ways. As I said, it could be very dangerous, it can be minor, such as these metro issues, and it can be in between, when you have some experiences that are forcing you to buy, for instance, or that are preventing you from being billed or from canceling your account, and so on and so forth. So we can conceptualize all these kind of scenarios. So there is all these ranges of things. And then with the advent of AI, we can also imagine how user experience is so ubiquitous and how it will never, never disappear. Because even with AI, we still have a lot of questions that are yet unanswered about our interactions with products. So, for instance, my first perspective from interacting with AI would be that it's not because I have something that is quote unquote intelligent to which I can talk to that it makes my experience directly pleasant. Let me take an example. I use Claude.ai sometimes to play around with. Recently, I discovered, I don't know if it was a bug, I don't know if it was me that did not see it. It doesn't matter. But I arrived at the end of my quota to be able to use the messages with the AI. And I was not being told that beforehand, so that I would optimize my inputs to be able to save on my use. So that's an example. Another example would be probably, what are the users feeling when the AI is writing so fast, for instance? What are users feeling about the back and forth communication and the correction? One aspect that I would like to dive deeper in is related to how trustworthy it is. If I want to make research with AI and this outputs some sort of synthetic answer without citing its sources, for instance, all these kind of things that are ever present as questions with AI. So we can conceptualize the fact that we can innovate again and again, we will still have questions about our experiences. And so that's my feeling. We should never dismiss the fact that if we use a technology or a product, it should serve our needs first. And if something doesn't work out, it's probably because this needs to be improved. The problem is not on us. So that's the first aspect. And then I really want people to understand that user experience is so interesting to me because it's ever present. User experience is everywhere. It's here when you use something that has been made by a big corporation, but it's also here in a various number of ways. The ways you design your apartment. This is user experience. You're the designer and you're the user. The way you set up your plate before eating, the way you write your notes in a notebook or in your notes app, favorite notes app, and so on and so forth. The way you craft your career, the way you design your goals, and so on and so forth. There are so many ways. User experience is present at every stage of your life. And so this is something that is major. And so we should not dismiss it, first of all, and I think we should all engage with it at some point. We should all be aware of what it is and how can it be done right. In the same way, we try to learn to optimize our learning process because we will learn throughout our whole life. In the same way, we try to take notes in a smart way. In the same way, we try to be healthy. So that's my opinion. It's so ever present. We should have in mind what is a design thinking process, what it is. We should all be familiar with the fact that, okay, we need to solve problems in our everyday lives at any scale you prefer. It can be your individual scale, it can be the scale of your family, it can be the scale of your community. And so, okay, there is a problem. What can I do with that? First of all, what is the problem? Is it a problem worth being solved? This can tell us a lot about prioritization and essentialism. Probably I have many problems in my life that probably I should prioritize. Okay, how can I prioritize? User experience can give us the tools to think in a smart way about that. Basically, how frequent is the problem? How important is the problem? So we have frameworks in user experience to help us with that. And when we adapt them to other scenarios, it can be very helpful and powerful. So we can think about that. We can also think about, okay, now I will come up with a solution. Oh, maybe first I can brainstorm solutions. And then once I brainstorm solution, I can filter them. Okay, what is the most feasible? And what is the one that would be the most impactful? That's also a framework in user experience. It's called a 2x2 prioritization matrix. But it's basically that. It's a tool we use in user experience. And it's probably not proper to user experience. However, in user experience and design thinking, these are tools that we commonly use. That's the point. And so we can also think about asking questions the right way. If tomorrow I want to understand what are the most common pain points in my family, whatever, how I can best support my family or my community, probably I should ask questions in an open-ended way so that I would gather more insights, basically. Or if I want to improve processes inside of my company, it can also be a way, asking questions in an open-ended way. And then we could also conceptualize the idea of making patterns to analyze data. So my colleagues have reported successively XYZ problem. Okay. In the month of October, these problems were reported. In the month of September, these problems were reported. Okay, let's map them out. Let's see what are the common points. Okay, in the last year, what were the main issues that I faced individually? The main friction points to my growth, basically. And these are all user experience, let's say, tools that we use commonly. So that's why I think it's so important, because it will help people adopt a mindset and a way of thinking. So that was my first part. Why I think user experience is so important, because it's present everywhere. Now, probably by now you understood the definition I want to communicate about user experience. I'm not saying this is the best one, I'm saying this is mine. And I'm in peace with this one. And I would be really happy to know about your definitions. If you prefer another way of defining it, if you disagree with mine, please let me know. But basically, my definition would be user experience is about everything and anything a person is experiencing when interacting with a product, a service, technology, before, during, and after this interaction occurs, And taking into account the context. This is also a very important part. If I use my phone in the metro, I will probably not experience the same thing as if I use my phone walking in the street or on my sofa, basically. So this is also important. And so by now, probably you can understand why I'm so interested in that. So, but if it's not the case yet, I will also list other topics of why I'm so interested, other reasons. So as I said, first of all, it's applicable in a lot of situations. It helps you, that's my second reason. It helps you to learn more about you. When you master this area, this topic, it helps you to learn more about yourself. Because these tools become kind of part of you and of your mindset. And so you try to analyze, where are you doing things that could be optimized? Is it worth optimizing it? What could be some ideas? How can you test them out? And I'm not saying to do this at any point of your life and at every moment, but for sure there are some areas in which you can borrow these principles. For me, for instance, I tend to adopt these principles when it comes to be more efficient at work and to optimize my processes. So that would be another reason why I think it is so important. And also because it's at the root of innovation. It's at the root of innovation because an innovation is about solving users and humans' problems in a way that hasn't been done before. That is innovation. So if you don't solve a user need, you're not innovating, first of all. And if you do it in a way that already exists, you're not innovating. So that's why user experience is so important, because it can help you discover what your users are really needing. And it can help you, by using other tools such as a simple competitive analysis, know what other competitors are doing. But not only, for instance, you can use some research methodologies with users that will allow you to evaluate how users are experiencing the competitors' products, for instance. So these are examples, but basically the tools that we use in user experience allow us to innovate and to create new products. Of course, that these are not the only reasons. Another one would be that it's highly complex. It's like some of the projects I took part in, I thought when I entered and successively during and at the end of the project, I thought, wow, this will never ever get solved. This is a problem without solution. And this is why it's so exciting. It's exciting because you can solve a problem in many ways. However, there is usually a handful set of problems you need to solve. So that also teaches you some philosophy. It's basically the philosophy of less is better and focusing. Being, let's say, harsh about being essentialist. I need to focus on this set of problem, and then I can brainstorm solutions, but then I will prioritize them. It's always about prioritizing and solving the right problem. And so it's really about identifying a problem, making sure this problem is worth solving, and then going for it. And why am I emphasizing so much on these two steps? Is because this is the big part of the activity. 90% of the user experience work should be about identifying and validating a problem. Then the rest would flow easily. Relatively speaking, I mean. At least that's my perspective. Also, it's highly collaborative. So that's let's say the consequence of it being complex. You cannot address it all by yourself. It's really tricky. So you can be a freelance user experience professional, but it will be highly difficult, let's say, because usually you need data to help you paint a global picture of the problem. You need support from other professionals such as designers, product managers, analysts, content writers, and so on. So you might need all of that. And so that is why this this discipline is so collaborative, and it's also what makes it so exciting, because you get to learn so much about other people and about yourself only by collaborating. So you become much more powerful if you work inside of a team of highly skilled individuals and creative people and really user-centered people, let's say. So that's my perspective. And finally, as I said, and that was the first point, it is independent of any product. It's human first, product second. So I would say it's product agnostic, meaning it's not dependent on any kind of product. And so one way you can conceptualize that, as I said, if you listen to previous episodes, I already ran projects in which I literally entered the project without knowing anything about the product, and I ran a successful set of user interviews, and I delivered successfully recommendations at the end of the project. That worked. It was not the best project, I'm gonna be honest with you, because it's always better to be informed before starting out a project, to be able to, let's say, contextualize what you learned during the project. However, the set of techniques and mindset is applicable to anything. And so that's why my personal opinion is kind of, let's say, well, I would say I'm opinionated with the trend we see when companies recruit for someone asking, have you done XYZ before? Like, imagine you're an AI company. Have you done, if you're hiring a UX researcher, have you done projects related to AI? Or have you done projects related to e-commerce? My answer has always been the same. Being honest, saying, no, I haven't done it, but I'm eager to learn, and design thinking is still design thinking. I can't apply it with 1,000 products. I did e-commerce, switching from on-demand delivery, switching from automotive, and it worked. Yes, you need to ramp up. There is a time needed to understand the product, and that will make you more relevant. But it's not a reason to think I'm not qualified. So if you are at a stage in your career in which you want to switch industries, go for it. If you have an attraction for that, go for it. Because your set of tools and techniques and skills are highly transferable. First of all, if you are not a UX researcher, probably, and this is something that I tell my mentees all the time, probably you come from a background in which you have skills that are transferable. So here we are speaking skills transferable across backgrounds. So now imagine you're already working as a UX professional in one type of industry or sector. Imagine in e-commerce and you want to switch for automotive, let's say. It's possible. You can do it because the set of techniques and tools are the same. The skills that will be needed from you will be able to craft a set of questions that are unbiased, be able to analyze qualitative data, be able to analyze quantitative data, and so on and so forth. Collaboration, user centricity, and so on and so forth. So if you're in that scenario, please go for it. Don't restrict yourself. So that is about my, let's say, rationale behind why user experience is so important. So in a nutshell, if you're from outside of user experience field, just know that you're experiencing, well, you are, let's say, having experiences and user experiences all the time. So you're not a stranger to that. And the name is probably not, let's say, the best to communicate what it is, but it's really about what you experience when you interact with something. It's as basic as that. But at the same time, it's so complex because it has to do with your thoughts, with your feelings, with your behaviors, your expectations, the way you conceptualize how something should work, which is mental models, the way you need something to happen, the way you experience frustration when something doesn't work out. All of that is user experience. So that's the first point. It's ubiquitous to our life. Second point, this is something that is highly complex. And so there are teams that are dedicated to improving this process, basically. Third point, when something doesn't work out and you need to communicate to a company that the product isn't working out for you, and you have some time, of course, do it. Because it's not about you. Well, it's about you, but it's not your fault. If you don't manage to use something, don't go for this principle called, now I remember, learned helplessness. Don't think you are the problem. You're not the problem. The product is the problem. The product should be designed for you. So that would be my elements of answers to the question, what is user experience? And why is it so interesting to you? And so you have some elements of answers. And in another episode, I will continue on this topic by telling you about how I discovered about user experience, where I came from, and why I like it so much, and why I believe to this day I was destined to go in the user experience field. So I hope, even if this episode is a bit different from the other ones, I hope you learned at least one thing. As always, if it's the case, please subscribe, share it with your friends and colleagues, and let me know. Let me know if you want me to address more of these kind of topics, or if you want me to address any other topic. As I said, I will make another episode on this topic, and you can expect a lot of other episodes coming as I have a lot of ideas. But until then, take care. Bye-bye. And that's it for today's episode. Thank you everyone for joining me today on New Exchange. I hope you found today's episode insightful and valuable. Make sure to subscribe in order for you not to miss the next episode. Share it if you liked it, and leave a review. Thank you for your time and attention. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for future topics, feel free to reach out directly to me. You can find all the details in the show notes. And see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.